First up is George, and let me say George and I go back even further than the Mary Rose, I think. I can't think honestly of anybody. we sunk it together. Can't think of anybody who's had a footprint in more innovative projects from before the BBC Doomsday Disc through to tomorrow than George. He's everything that the BBC needs in its hour of need. He's ingenious, he's stable, he's been there for a long time, and he's wise. And I can't think of anybody better to hear from right now on what the future looks like. George, you're enormously welcome. Come on up.
In fact, there are two of us. This is a buy one, get one free episode.
We're a bargain.
We're a bargain, that's right. This is new value, extra license fee value. Anyway, the first slide I'm going to show I put in deliberately to irritate Stephen. I know why. BBC Education started a long time ago, in fact in 1924. And the reason I'm showing this slide is because it gives the sort of narrative to what we're going to talk about. By the time BBC Education Department had been going for a couple of years, they published a paper that basically said, in terms of real education and learning, broadcasting is not enough. And in a way, that's what we've done ever since. And so what we're really going to talk about is how we are hoping to be able to use mobile applications of all kinds to go beyond the broadcast. So very quickly, in those days, if you went to one of these listening groups, which is rather lovely, you could actually get a certificate, the BBC Wireless School. Presumably, if you had a crystal set, then you could call it mobile learning, but that's really a bit of a cheek. So towards 2012, I've called it. So basically, one of the things that I think you will start to see happening in organisations like the BBC and others is that we'll start to include location information right at the very beginning of the production process. This is something which we've been talking about for years and years and years. Very hard to do, although if you think about it, even at the videotape level, it's got time and date, so if it's got latitude and longitude and the cameraman's name and all that, and that's just a piece of video. So once you've got that, and if you imagined, in the future that every BBC webpage, if they exist in a conventional sense, also has locational metadata in it, then even if we can't think of any reason why we'd use it now, I'm sure some bright spark will come up with lots of things. Increasingly from the BBC, and especially from BBC Learning, you'll find that what we'll be offering is what we call multi-platform experiences, or 360-degree, or any of these other phrases you may have heard of. So, a TV broadcast possibly, not necessarily, a web experience almost certainly, mobile, increasingly so, and I would imagine by this date that we're talking about, a huge amount of our output will have some version of it, not necessarily identical in each case. And I think Adrian was just wanted to touch on a little bit on digital identity and why this is an issue.
I work in BBC's Research and Innovation Group quite closely with George, collaborate for the last 4 or 5 years. And one of the particular things that I think for around 2012 that's been ducked quite a few times is how we're actually going to move across all these seamless platforms so that I may blog and who will actually be responsible for hanging on to that or being responsible for engaging across different parties.
Okay, so just very quickly, this just kind of summarizes what we try to do. Traditional broadcasting is exceptionally good at stimulating and engaging. 9 million people will watch The Last Day of Pompeii or something like that. But within education, right from that very first slide I showed you, we've tried to do these other things. Now, clearly, when the web kicks in and, old-fashioned email even, then the enabled communication becomes a lot more doable. The ultimate outcome on this is that obviously we hope the audience can do more things, whatever those things are. So Adrian's just going to touch on some of the mobile stuff.
So just to place the context of the BBC and mobile. Mobile is considered a key part of our output strategy. Our mobile service has 2 million unique users a month. Radio 1 takes 500,000 texts a month in, visualizes them on the web in a form of a text cloud. BBC News is ramped up its services post 7th of July about handling everyone's a citizen journalist, they've got a camera in their pocket, and increasingly we're becoming reliant on the fact that people will take photos, send videos. And Bitesize has been running a mobile Java MP3 download service for, I think, 2.5 years, getting students out of jail when they need it, just before those exams. You won't be able to read this particularly well, but part of one of our big studies is a project called Participate. And our way of getting to 2012 is actually to go back and look at a lot of experiments that have taken place in the last 2 or 3 years. Some of these have now ramped up and gone far bigger. These cover mobile, ubiquitous computing, mass participation, but things like Springwatch are in there. But there's a lot of learning projects from likes of Future Lab, Earby Dragons and stuff like that. And my gut feeling is that a lot of these will be mature services by 2012, but we're not going to invent masses of new stuff on the top. And this might, again, colours might not be that visible, but it's worth, this is a recent study just published by the Beeb on 12 to 17-year-olds who are target audience for a lot of learning content. Backs up a lot of Mr. Prensky's world. 90% of them already have the phone at least. The key thing being the gender difference. So the accepted norm would be that boys are geeks, boys do geek things and use their phones, and actually this study suggesting females are very technologically savvy, and more importantly, 83% are on pay-as-you-go. So cost is absolutely a critical barrier, and is actually a stimulus for innovation because kids use Bluetooth far more easily than adults.
So we're just going to scamper through a few of the sort of lab-based trials with a view to how these things might pan out again for 2012. So we did a technical trial of which you can now see, products on the market. We were just using early devices. But our main concern with any mobile application, particularly given that it's not like being in a desktop, so you've got less than ideal viewing conditions, is what are the editorial issues? We don't invent the technology. We've got to use what's around. So we've got to think about our editorial proposition. And if you've got a piece of video on a mobile device or some text, the viewing conditions may not be ideal. And neither of you want to watch screens and screens full of stuff, nor watch large amounts. So we did this little thing where if you were there in the open air, you could choose various things. In this case, I'm just going to choose, so you'd get, so this was effectively what you might call an editorial experiment, how much stuff. And I mean, the first thing we realized is that even that is far too much text for this kind of application. So again, I think we're really going to have to look very closely at the sort of bite-size idea and crunch it down even more. But obviously, because one of the main assets of the BBC is its video library, one of the things we hope will start to become really common
all kinds of shows. But if there was one
video that's
who
locked
came
to
to
the location,
represent
if you
the anarchic energy of the London
then
crowd,
this is the
it
kind of
was
thing
Hunt.
we could be providing by then. So you get the idea. So
picking up on this, many people may know that 2 years ago BBC ran a service called Coast that won a number of awards. The idea being to take and build on that and say what actually was state of the art, what was feasible on a mass scale. So 15 sites around the country, all the content was locally produced, majority was audio, stills and text, no video. And the idea was, from the broadcast, driving people out and about, giving them the opportunity to take real learning journeys out in the world, supported by the power that a broadcaster can bring with red button services, tailing into local news, and predominantly using the web potentially as a starting point. So what you got was a WAP service in and on the space. You can't really see it, but there's a little poster on a lamp post, which actually we trialled barcoding, data coding, QR codes with HP. And you could, in advance, load in the whole program as an MP3. All the content designed to be, as you were taking a walking journey, the intimate guide of your space. That's a couple of years old. Doesn't sound that 2012. But if you take 2012, all of the content produced by the BBC, by any broadcaster, is geo-marked up. So at any point in any physical space, you could pull up content appropriate to your interest, your need, or just what's around you. Now, obviously, the scenarios are, hey, advertisers will be spamming you, but the fact is how will you make those choices? And I think you won't be using data codes. You'll be taking photos. We're trialing stuff at the moment. You take a photo of the anchor, and that would be about what would empower you on.
Right, so BBC Learning is involved in a lot of events, actual practical events, not just broadcasting web and so forth. So we're interested here in how we can sort of have mobile provision at an event. And so, for instance, with somewhere like Culloden, which is a fairly windswept battlefield, is also a rather sacred place. You can't put a lot of sort of orientation up there for people to find their way around. But we did this, doing this experiment where, rather than use GPS, we're trying to get location from wireless LAN, which is a fairly tough nut to crack. And you might say, well, why are you going to do it outdoors? And the answer is because it kind of works outdoors and indoors. GPS is not terrific inside buildings, as far as I'm aware. So if you could have this idea, this concept, that with your portable gadget, whatever that is in the future, you could be standing somewhere outside connecting to some content, in our case obviously BBC, but it could be anybody's. And then as you walk along, if you then go inside, if you come inside this building, there's some kind of transactional handover to the people who run this wonderful place. And they then deliver content, and then when you come out again, you possibly rejoin the BBC or any other person providing a service. So we just sort of had Peter Snow.
Hello, I'm Peter Snow, and I'd like to welcome you to this special handheld version of Battlefield Britain. With this little gadget in your hand, you'll be able to explore the battlefield. And it'd be like having a time machine with you, because what you'll be able to do, depending on where you are on the battlefield, is to access scenes from our tumultuous past. Just follow the instructions on the screen, and you'll enjoy something really rather special. Good luck.
So the idea there is, you know, the way I wrote that script is it's a time machine. You know, we better move on quickly.
Yeah, and so again, building on a previous piece of work to take you to where we think we are now. This was a pilot for 5 days back in Easter 2007 with BT and Microsoft as collaborators down at Kew Gardens, aims exploring mobile, these seeds of content, but particularly looking to move into more of a knowledge sharing space. So we were producing content that was location specific from our archive of Year at Kew, Life of Plants, and BBC News. Particular focus here was on a non-lead user group, looking at families and older couples. Looking for simplest technology, so again, picking up on older technologies, 2 or 3 years old phones, using physical wayfinding. Simplest was to consider it like a museum guide, but it was richer of video, so you could have video, audio, text, and importantly, what we were doing was trying to stimulate people to contribute knowledge in and of the moment. So we included other people's videos, so stimulating people through seeds of BBC content and then getting them to add their own stories, which now, if everybody's got a camera, is feasible. Lots of mixed, we do deep studies, behavioural things, because that's what can inform us to be ready for future technologies. But you can see here different generational, cross-generational activities, so grandparents, grandchildren, you can see siblings engaging, you can see children directing adults, and what we've basically are focusing on at the moment is about this growth of family knowledge. We're completely convinced everybody's going to have a device in their pocket, but how do you design to bring people together, and actually what does that way of peer knowledge sharing occur? And thinking 2012, partners at BT produced a comparable system that used far more like a TomTom in your pocket, but you were looking at the multi-platform, so it was providing the all of your stories and the content that you've seen when you get home. It was pumping it out into Google Earth, so you could see your journey against other people's journeys, and saying how, if we still have televisions, IPTV, which BT would like us to have televisions to use, will be there, and you can have their own personalised guide on in future.
I think, given the time, we'll skip through this and just do participate, shall we?
Well, how many have we got?
We can talk about Doomsday another day.
Yeah.
This leads into it, but Adrian's just going to talk quickly about participate.
So Doomsday is your teaser. You've got to go out and use the web to find what Doomsday is all about, or cajole George to tell you the tale. Participate's a 3-year study, currently about halfway through, looking at pervasive computing and mass participation. Partners, BT, Microsoft, Science Scope, who do data loggers for schools. We're Blast Theory and Arts Collective, and the Universities of Bath and Nottingham. And we're looking at the convergence between pervasive online and broadcast, looking over games, communities, but here just focusing on the learning aspects. We're looking at how you can use handhelds to engage in mass science experiments, but also not just the data collection, but the idea that they'll annotate with their own films, photos, thoughts. Driving towards having a site like this, which is up and live. We've got about 15 schools. We're looking for more across the country. They're taking part in their own activities, collaboratively within the class, within the school, and collaborating with schools across the country. This is the sort of stuff we're exploring. So this is automated data capture of carbon monoxide outside of school at 3:36 p.m. High levels because cars are parked with their engines running. It's all bog standard, but the kids came up with the experiment. They did it. They took the photos. They've made the film. They've interrogated the parents about why they're doing it. 2012 vision would be that the sensors aren't data loggers that sit in your school, but they're the phone that sits in your pocket, a lot more personalised, a lot about your data, so the biomapping guys and the AirB Dragons. Kids doing the thing. Interesting here, you've got the merging of data logging, GPS, storyboarding, digital stills, digital mobile phones. All of this is then uploaded back in class. 2012, my expectation would be that that would be done on the fly because we will have resolved the cost to entry along the networks. And my aspiration would be in 2012, this is a global debate. Why aren't we getting engaged in the global debate with kids? And there's no reason because we're all connected anyway. So we're not clairvoyants.
That's right. So these are the issues we've got to address very quickly. A lot of people in this room will recognise some of them. Copyright costs, I think, is a fundamental problem, particularly for our younger audience. Convergence, how do we deal with the fact that there are many, many different pieces of equipment out there, and specifically BBC has certain kind of policy issues. Will we be allowed to do this kind of thing? So we've set up a mobile and UGL group to start to look at some of these questions. And so it's kind of where next? You know, it's a mobile phone, there's a magic wand, close proximity, touch it on, pick up some content. So I thought I'd just, this is a little jokey video that we made of what a future mobile phone might look like with a flexible screen. Looking quite near market, right? And that's it. Sorry, it was slightly rushed, but...
Sorry.
Am I on with this?
I thought you were coughing.
Oh, good, yeah. One quick question, James. Just before you ask it, would you throw your thing into the audience so we can, anywhere you like, really, somebody will catch it. That'll be well done. Good. He's the next questioner. Your question is?
Very interested to know, George, about within the BBC, how you are coping with being the British Broadcasting Corporation, with suddenly all this media coming the other way.
With some difficulty, I think, is the honest answer to that. This is a debate Steve and I have had for years about the user-generated content, is what you're talking about. Part of the reason for our R&D group set up is to sort of tackle that, because we all understand that the learning that happens when users create some content. What I'm really interested now is how we can take that stage further so that potentially that content could be of significant use to somebody else. So I think, we're just trying to handle it like that. Obviously, news in different departments have got their own different ways, but we specifically are interested in user-generated learning from a mobile device or otherwise. In a way, it doesn't matter. Increasingly, I think it will be a mobile device. So we're just trying to find out is the answer.
The bit it says over the door about let nation speak unto nation, it probably should have also meant socially defining our world through image and data and time and capture.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much to both of you. If one of you stay for the panel, that would be just fab. You could both stay. We haven't got enough chairs, so that's
we just
perfect, really. Now, I spent